different bases to appeal. The strongest basis is that the jury reached a verdict on coercion. It found there was not coercion, and I think the judge said coercion today as a basis for a sentence at least a dozen times. We think that that is unconstitutional. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean, and so we are planning to appeal.
The moment the judge's gavel came down, the sound echoed like thunder through the courtroom. It wasn't just a ruling, it was a sentence that would follow Diddy for the rest of his life. The air was so heavy it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. Diddy sat there, staring blankly ahead.
Absolutely. Filed a cross appeal. What would happen in that regard if they filed a cross appeal and then Sean Diddy Combs get a higher sentence?
He would not get a higher sentence, and they're not gonna cross appeal. We're gonna appeal. We think we're right, and they'll respond to the appeal, and it'll be decided by the Second Circuit as soon as.
Tell us about the conversation you had with your client after the sentencing.
Consensual. The judge clearly thought the sexual encounters weren't consensual.
Because he's biased.
What did you make of his remarks?
He's biased.
If anyone, I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no sex trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the prostitution offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror,
yes,
one that we did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury's verdict.
Well, at least the judge was open-minded. At least the judge was open-minded for both sides. He gave consideration.
Did you have a chance to talk to Sean Combs? Did you have a chance to talk to your client? Can you tell us about the conversation after the sentence?
How was he?
How's your client?
How would it impact sex workers?
But he's okay to push back a little. But he's okay to
Come on, man.
stop pushing people, y'all.
Y'all making this a circus now, bro.
Space out. He does feel justice was served, though. He said he takes accountability, and I felt like Diddy definitely took accountability for everything, sir. And I would like to just let you know that everything was not consensual, sir. Please don't say that. It was not consensual. Even Diddy admitted.
This is the defense team, man. Let's ask him a question.
Yes, but he did allegedly.
All right, Queen. All right, Queen. All right, Queen.
Mark, can you talk to us about talking to Sean after this?
Talking about domestic violence.
I'm not. Obviously, we spoke to Sean. I'm not going to talk about what Sean and we discussed. It's obviously a privilege.
We all feel comfortable bringing.
And tell us what
location are you going to recommend?
No matter which community it impacts.
What are the next steps?
Why weren't the sex workers on trial today?
Hey, hold on, bro.
Where were the escorts? Stop, bro.
Thank you, guys.
Here's the question. Here's what's next.
Why weren't the escorts
that we're going to try and find the right facility for Mr. Combs. We're going to ask the judge to recommend that. We are very serious about pursuing an appeal. So we have a number of things all going on at the same time.
His work at MDC Brooklyn, where Xavier Donaldson said, we've had assemblymen and politicians, billionaires in MDC, but nobody besides Sean Combs was there to actually help out the other detainees and the other inmates there. And then finally with Mark Agnifilo, his whole argument was that domestic violence comes with childhood trauma. So I feel like the defense was really kind of trying to pull at the heartstrings a little bit of the judge and even possibly the public too, because this was their final say to all of the people, all of the media coverage that this case has brought attention to. And so I think at the end of the day, from the defense's perspective, they wanted everyone, including the judge, to just look at Sean Combs as a man who made terrible, terrible mistakes, and whether or not he's been punished enough for it, that was kind of what the judge had to consider today.
By the way, I think it was interesting that I think the prosecution said in response that only one of the 5 defense lawyers who spoke actually mentioned the victims. It was very much Sean Combs focused. Now,
his mind struggling to process the words that had just sealed his fate. For a man who once commanded rooms full of power brokers, artists, and celebrities, that courtroom suddenly felt like a cage. And in that moment of raw disbelief, something inside him snapped. He leaned sharply toward his lawyer, his voice low but urgent, the kind of voice that carried both fear and fury. File it, he whispered. His lawyer hesitated, her eyes wide. Now, he demanded, his voice trembling but firm. Do it now. Everyone nearby could hear the desperation in his tone. The verdict wasn't even fully recorded yet, but Diddy was already pushing his team into overdrive, ordering them to file an appeal immediately. He wasn't going to wait. He wasn't going to breathe. He wanted to fight back before the ink even dried. The judge hadn't even left the bench when Diddy's legal team began scrambling. Laptops opened, papers shuffled, pens clicked. It was chaos in motion. His top attorney leaned into her associates, barking orders, flipping through documents, pulling up prior motions. She was moving fast, almost too fast, but that was the order. The cameras outside the courthouse hadn't even switched off from the live broadcast.
Sean Diddy Combs is getting support from his kids. During the rapper's October 3rd sentencing hearing, several of Combs' children took the stand to advocate for their dad, who is facing years in jail following his July conviction on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. During their remarks, per NBC News, his 34-year-old son Quincy told Judge Aaron Subramanian that his father is, quote, a changed man. His brother, 31-year-old Justin, went on to add that he hopes his father will get the chance to right this wrong and to be the man he truly is. 27-year-old Christian Combs also asked the judge to give his father grace in his sentencing, adding, "He is the greatest in the world. He is my hero, has always been my hero, and always will be my hero. He always taught me to treat women with respect." NBC News noted that Combs was visibly moved during the statements, putting his head down to cry as his daughter Chance took the stand. The 18-year-old told the court, "We have emptiness in our lives," noting that her father's 13 months in jail have been unexpectedly healing. Combs also has a 2-year-old daughter named Love Sean, and in her speech to the judge, her 18-year-old sibling Delilah stated in part, "Our 2-year-old sister is asking where Dad is, the same way we grew up motherless. It's a hole that can't be filled. We are tired of being strong. We have already lost so much, our mother, our father. Please give us the chance to heal together and move forward together." Combs shares Christian, Quincy, Delilah, and her twin sister Jessie with late ex Kim Porter, who passed.
Impacted by Sean Combs's, the allegations that have been against him and the conduct, all of that stuff. But they said right up the front, they were like, "We're not here to make excuses for him. We aren't here to excuse his mistakes. We need him in our lives." Jessie Combs talking about how she lost her mom, her mom being Kim Porter when she was very young, and that Sean Combs promised to be there to keep them safe. Then Chance Combs spoke afterwards, and she said that we're just daughters who need our father. When we talk, he speaks with a clear mind now. He's more patient. He's thoughtful. He wants to be a better man. He wants to be a better father. He's parented our 2-year-old sister from jail, and I see glimpses of our father during that. She said our sister deserves, and that the sister being 2-year-old Love deserves a father who is present to teach her how to ride a bike, to tuck her in at night before she goes to bed, something that all kids want from their parents, right? Then Delilah Combs afterwards spoke after Chance. She said that we're scared of the thought of not having our mom and our dad in our life. And she says that these are the years that we'll never get back. She says, "I know that missing years hurt because we lost our mom and they've already lost so much." So really that was kind of a time where we were really kind of seeing everyone get a little emotional in terms of people on the defendant's side. Sean Combs himself, I think it was a moment where we were kind of seeing him inside the courtroom at the defense table really kind of turn and look at his children. Kind of hard for him to keep a straight face with that. Like, he was so emotional, which I understand. He's a father, and he's a father to many children, and the kids have gone through a lot in their life. And so it was very emotional, Jesse. I can definitely say that. It was a lot of tears inside the gallery, especially on Sean Combs' side, but definitely from Sean Combs himself, too. He was very emotional while his kids were speaking.
There's a lot at stake today. It's not surprising you're seeing this. By the way, before I ask you something else, I just have to let you know, the amount of love that you're getting online is quite palpable. Basti failed. Greetings, my queen. We love you in Germany. Christina Lester, super chat comment, who's been great today. Tell Elizabeth her skin is glowing as per usual. Nikki Hayes, how are you, Elizabeth? We heart and appreciate you. Anto Grego,
of the sentencing when whispers began to spread, Diddy's filing an appeal tonight. You could see it written all over his face, shock, disbelief, and rage all tangled together. He kept shaking his head, muttering under his breath. Witnesses in the room said he looked like a man trying to wake himself from a nightmare. The sentence had been harsh, longer than even the prosecution had asked for. The judge had made it clear, this was about accountability, this was about sending a message, and Diddy couldn't believe it. He had walked into that courtroom thinking his name, his legacy, his power might buy him leniency, but none of that mattered here. His lawyer leaned toward him again. trying to calm him down, but he wasn't hearing any of it. I said file it, he repeated, his tone sharper now, more desperate. He slammed his palm on the table, the sound cutting through the murmurs around the room. The guards moved closer, ready in case he lost control. But this wasn't a tantrum, this was panic disguised as determination. For years, Diddy had lived by one rule: control everything, control the narrative.
Beautiful Jesse and Queen Elizabeth, love you guys, you make a great team. Maylin Bourbon, oh how I missed the chat, the lunchtime show, and the Long Crime team and panel. Long Crime, thank you for all your hard work. So, and super chat question from Mike, what's the update? Well, I think Elizabeth just laid out the entire update. I will ask you this. There was a question from the lone medic. How long does Elizabeth think Diddy will be sentenced for? Wasn't there a comment today, Elizabeth, from the judge that he does not see any reason to deviate from the guidelines of what, 5 to 7 years?
Yes, and so there was a lot of math that I was honestly doing, Jesse, because when they're talking about the sentencing guidelines, they're always talking about it in ranges of months. And so because there are 12 months in a year, I'm having to do quick math. So really what the judge is kind of looking at and what the PSR recommendation was 70 to 87 months, which by my calculations, because I don't have a calculator inside that courtroom, about 6 or 7 years. So I could see it possibly being definitely on the higher range than maybe the defense was expecting. I think especially in terms of the judge's tone today when he brought up that Sean Combs had been talking publicly about possibly doing an in-person speaking engagement in Miami. I think actually I take that back. It wasn't the judge who brought that up, but it was more so the government who specifically brought that up, because it seems like from the defense's side that they were expecting possibly for him to be released today pending the outcome of what the sentencing may be. And so in terms of my personal opinions, I don't think the judge is going to be lenient today. And I don't know if necessarily the victim impact statement, seeing the video that played inside the courtroom, hearing from Sean Combs's children, hearing from his defense attorneys will sway him in any type of way. I think he's probably already has his decision already made. But if I were to have my guess, I wouldn't put it past him to have anything below 2 years, and possibly with the possibility of time served, that's only another year in prison. And so we'll see what the outcome will be once that sentence is eventually handed down, which will be later this afternoon for sure, possibly.
Yeah, so we have a question also, and I apologize if you answered it before, but it's this is from Rebecca L. What is Diddy wearing today?
Yes, well, Rebecca, Diddy is wearing, because I always write it down, whatever he is wearing inside, is wearing a tan sweater, a white undershirt, and he's wearing dark pants today, which is different from the last time I actually saw him in the courtroom, and that being the hearing that happened just last week when he actually appeared in the MDC jumpsuit. And so still kind of a similar color, but definitely in civilian clothes as opposed to last week's hearing.
And by the way, this revelation that Mia, who is one of the victims in this case, claimed that Sean Combs sexually assaulted her. She was supposed to provide a statement today. She had provided a letter to the court. The defense objected to her providing a statement in court. She didn't want to speak today. I mean, can you talk to us about that revelation too? That happened at the beginning of the day.
That was a big revelation. I was expecting to hear some in-person victim impact statements, especially from government witnesses. And so it was a big shocker when Christy Slavic said today that Mia no longer wants or wishes to give a victim impact statement. And she, Christy Slavic, had said that Mia had submitted a written statement, and that was the same letter from the government sentencing memo. And then it was interesting, Jesse.
The business, the room, the people, but for the first time, he had lost that control. The system had spoken, and no amount of money or fame could undo what had just been said. That's why the appeal wasn't just a legal move, it was survival. Filing immediately wasn't about strategy, it was about holding on to whatever tiny shred of power he had left. As his lawyers began typing up the notice of appeal, reporters outside were already racing to break the story. Diddy files appeal within minutes of sentencing. The headlines read, "The public was stunned." Some said it showed arrogance, others said it was desperation. Either way, it was clear, Diddy wasn't accepting the verdict. Not today, not ever. The prosecutor stood nearby, watching quietly as the defense team scrambled. There was no sympathy in her eyes. To her, this was just another predictable move from a man who had always thought he could bend reality to his will. But this was the law. not the music industry. No amount of fame could rewrite.
My question in all of this, I will be very interested to see what Elizabeth Milner says when she comes out, because right now she is in the courthouse, so she is there watching P. Diddy as he's saying these immortal words. I want to know his emotion in all of it. I mean, we can read the words. He's saying, I'm sorry to Cassie, I'm sorry to Jane, I'm sorry to my children and my mother. You taught me better. I threw everything away. I ruined everything. But what is the emotion there? Is it just words? Is he completely stone cold face? Or is he crying? Is he upset? And I think all of these things are something that Judge Arun Subramanian will be clocking, because I mean, that's really what it is. Is he truly sorry? Is he truly remorseful for everything that he's done? I mean, he's now been convicted of a crime here, the transportation to engage in prostitution, which, to your point, Jesse, we haven't heard an apology for all of that. We've heard an apology for the domestic violence side of things. And I mean, I will just guess that Diddy might go on for a bit longer, as it is his first time really to address all of these accounts. But I want to know the emotion behind all of it.
It's a great point, and that's obviously something that Elizabeth Milner would know, because she's inside there. She can hear it for herself. But if we're clocking this, if we're clocking that he's not directly addressing the federal crimes that he was convicted of, you know Judge Subramanian's going to say it too. He says, I let down my community. I wanted to show we could take care of our own problems. I got lost. I'm not this bad person. I'm sorry to my community. I let you all down. People can change. I know I've changed. There is a part about this, Joe, and he goes, sometimes you have to go through life experiences. These are not excuses. I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I beg your honor for mercy to be a father again, to be a son again, a leader in my community again, to get the help I need. Now, Joe, look, we're criticizing parts of this from a legal point of view, from a human point of view. Could the judge be persuaded that this is a guy who's really learned his lesson, that could be a force of good, that he wasn't convicted of racketeering and sex trafficking, that while transportation to engage in prostitution is a serious crime, and there were elements of violence and drugs that were a part of it, and this happened many times, that perhaps he should not have to spend a significant portion of his life now in prison?
Here's what I say, at the risk of coming off like I'm banging on Diddy, and this is not a banging, Diddy day kind of thing for me. But if he's learned his lesson in 14 months, he'll learn it better in 2 or 3 years. And so what that means is there's got to be another reason over and above him learning his lesson. That's part of it. But over and above him learning his lesson, for him to be released more sooner than later. And that could be the force of good that he could be. I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to minimize the fact that he's, he's got ingenuity. He's creative. He has a huge platform. Everybody's going to be watching the things that he does next. And so that would have to be more the reason to let him get out earlier, because again, he knows how to succeed. And in all of these areas where he says, because of, he lost his father and it made him more likely to be a domestic abuser or whatever that was, he overcame the odds in so many other ways. So that doesn't fly either. So it's really gotta be his ability to do something maybe that almost nobody else could do coming from this situation. So I'm not gonna minimize the power of that and how the judge may evaluate that, but it's going to have to be that even more than just learning the lesson.
Write the decision of that courtroom. When Diddy finally stood to be escorted out, he turned to his lawyer one last time. Make it happen, he said. I'm not staying in here. His voice was cracked, raw. It didn't sound like the confident mogul the world knew. It sounded like a man begging for air. His lawyer nodded, her face tight with focus. We're already on it, she said. Outside, chaos erupted as Diddy was led to the waiting transport van. Fans screamed his name, others jeered, and the media swarmed, shoving cameras into every possible angle. The flashbulbs lit up his face as he was shoved into the van, his eyes dark, distant, calculating. Even through the chaos, you could see it, the wheels in his mind turning. He was already planning his next move. Hours later, in a flurry of late-night filings, his legal team submitted the emergency appeal paperwork. They argued the judge's decision was excessive, emotionally charged, and legally questionable. The motion also demanded an immediate suspension of his sentence pending review. citing Diddy's status as a non-flight risk and public significance. It was a long shot, but they didn't care. This wasn't about winning yet. It was about staying in the fight.
Like a human perspective, it was very emotional. I mean, you couldn't help but feel for the children, especially his daughters, because some of his children have lost both parents. But, I was wondering, would their impact statement have any sway on the judge, who I believe that had already made up his mind going into sentencing? And so it was interesting just to hear just the emotional impact of what they've been through before Sean Combs was ultimately sentenced.
I think it did. I think it did have an impact on him. He mentioned something about the children later on. Again, we'll get to that. We're teasing it up because it was significant what the judge said. The judge would end up referencing not only Sean Combs, but the children and the victims too. We'll get to that. All of this was coupled by something I don't think I've seen in a sentencing. There was a video, an 11-minute video that was created by the defense that was played in court. What exactly was this video?
Well, this video, to me, Jesse, I kind of thought was a little bit of a love letter to Sean Combs, whether it was to the judge, whether it was to us in the public. I was kind of curious about where the direction was going, because we did see the video prior to it being shown in court today. So I did get a glimpse of it where I saw bits and pieces of the many accomplishments Sean Combs had. And I think that's one thing that nobody can take away from him, is that he did have incredible accomplishments, such as the record label, the fashion label, the fact that he was starting charter schools in the inner city, the fact that he was trying to raise money, the fact that he was getting more black and brown people in order to vote and do their civic duty, all of that sort. And so I think in terms of just what the video was to show that this is who Sean Combs is, but they were also glimpses of what he's like as a dad. And so there were moments where we saw him and his children together, and this was all of his children, going from his oldest child going to his youngest child, that being his daughter Love. And so we really got to see what it was like for him not to be this quote unquote larger than life person, but really to see what he is like as both him during his career and him as a father. And so it was a very humanizing video. It was about 11 minutes long. It was a very interesting glimpse into his life, kind of post all of the civil litigation, the federal case, all of that sort. And so some of the even quotes from it was, let's go, and that means to be positive. And so I think that was kind of the theme of this, was just positivity and just how positive Sean Combs has been to certain people's lives during certain moments of his life.
We got to talk about the big moment. This was the moment we were all waiting for. Sean Combs made a statement. Now, he provided a letter to the court in anticipation of this. It seems like what he said maybe echoed a lot of what he wrote in the letter. He talked about his time in the MDC. He talked about he can't change the past, but he can change the future, that he could be a force for good. He mentioned the victims. He mentioned how sorry he was. This was an important moment, though, because this is the first real opportunity he had since all of this began to substantively address the allegations, to address the charges, to address Jane, to address Cassie. This was his opportunity. He stayed silent the entire trial, as he was supposed to. He didn't take the stand. Talk to us about what he said in court today. And we weren't there. What was his tone like? How were people reacting to this? Because that wasn't captured.
Yeah, so honestly, Jesse, even right from the beginning, it was kind of a dramatic moment in a sense, because right off the bat, when the judge said, Sean Combs, I'll give you a moment, take however much time you need. And so we're all waiting for him to say the first word. Would he sit down while he's giving his impact statement? Would he stand up?
Sources close to his legal team said Diddy had been on the phone constantly from his holding cell, demanding updates every few minutes. He was furious, not just at the court, but at the system, at his own team, at everyone he felt had let this happen. One insider said, he's not processing it. He's in fight mode. He thinks this is still a game he can win. Meanwhile, the prosecution responded almost immediately, calling the appeal a desperate attempt to delay justice. They pointed out that Diddy had been found guilty after an extensive trial with overwhelming evidence. They wanted to make it clear that his celebrity status wouldn't buy him any special treatment. But Diddy didn't care about statements. He wanted results. By dawn, his team had already begun preparing a second motion, a request for emergency bail pending appeal. They claimed his safety was at risk in custody and that his mental health had deteriorated since sentencing. Reports suggested that during his first night behind bars, he refused to eat, pacing in his cell for hours. He was used to being surrounded by bodyguards and assistants, not concrete walls and cold silence.
Heard, you were given an opportunity over and over again, specifically during the investigation, and you can't be stopped. And if you can't be stopped, I'm going to have to be the one to stop you.
Yep. And by the way, the judge has considered his history. He said about the fact that, he became Sean Combs after his father died. That is especially impressive given the early and violent death of your father and the trauma that must have left. So he's appreciating all this, but at the same time, he's hitting all of the factors and he's talking about the evidence that came out during the course of this trial. He just said, Jane says he told her, take this pill, go out there, bleep his bleep, bleep him, I don't care. The court is not convinced this would not happen again. The court has considered the programs. They are outweighed by the trial record in this case. Now I'm wondering here, Joe, are we talking double digits?
I think we're going a little higher. We'll see how high we go. But 5 to 7 at least, and maybe even a little bit more. That's what it's sounding like. And there's an argument that the record supports that. Diddy was extra arrogant, and the length of time, I think, is incredibly persuasive and moving for the judge. Obviously, this is not something that happened once or twice and he got his hand caught in the cookie jar. This was built into what Diddy did. This was his culture, and he was truly lawless, just to put it where it really is. And so, the judge has been very honest about, I don't think that this deters you. And, I tell you, that tracks with me. Maybe we're all wrong, but to go off of what we've had happen and had said and had done and the trial record, that's not unreasonable for the judge to say that.
I am wondering also, Serena, if this is grounds for an appeal, where the court says, I'm not sentencing you on racketeering or sex. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. Okay, hold on one second. I'm getting the sentence right now. Okay, here we go. Oh boy.
I'm sweating.
Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. The court reaches a few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. Now, I don't know if that means that that's the actual sentence right now, but 135 months is over 11 years in prison. So over 11 years in prison would be more than necessary. That's what the judge is saying here, Serena. I don't know if that's the official sentence as of yet. We're waiting to get confirmation about that. But what does that say?
Well, just to throw that number out there like that means that at least he was considering the 11 years that the prosecution put forth, and maybe even more than that. It sounds like he's kind of tempering it, like that is more than necessary and it'll be less than the 11. But it also sounds like he at least considered it very seriously as an option.
Now I'm wondering, Sierra, are we talking 7 years? I mean, again, it's something we talked about earlier. Maybe the benefit of the family speaking and the benefit of the work that he's done was not to get to 11 years, but not to go lower than the 5 to 7 range. So that may have been the benefit, but I'm wondering if 7 years is what we might be looking at. Again, I'm waiting for official
violence. Reality was hitting him harder than any verdict could. The media devoured every second of it. News outlets ran footage of him from the courtroom, pausing on his expression when the sentence was read, replaying his whispered words to his lawyer, speculating on every possible legal outcome. Commentators debated whether he stood a chance, but few believed he could overturn the ruling. Still, everyone agreed on one thing: this was a fight unlike any he'd ever faced. As the days passed, Diddy's desperation grew. His calls to his lawyer became more frequent, more frantic. "They can't do this to me," he kept saying. "You need to fix this." His lawyer, exhausted but composed, kept reassuring him that the process was underway. But privately, sources said she knew the odds were against them. Appeals like this rarely succeed, especially when filed so hastily. Still, she kept moving forward, because Diddy wasn't the kind of man you told to wait. The prison environment was wearing him down. For a man who had spent decades surrounded by luxury, being confined to a small, cold cell was psychological torture. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Every sound echoed in his mind. He told his lawyer during one call, "You have to get me out. I can't do this." His legal team began pushing harder, contacting every possible connection in the system, using every resource to get his appeal heard sooner. But the court wasn't rushing. To them, this was routine. To Diddy, it was a ticking time bomb. Every minute inside felt like an eternity. Meanwhile, public opinion was split. Some fans sympathized, calling the sentence too harsh and the treatment inhumane. Others argued that justice was finally being served. The debate consumed social media, with everyone picking a side. Diddy's name trended for days, his every move scrutinized, his downfall dissected like a cultural event. Inside his cell, though, there were no trending hashtags, no cheering fans, just silence. He spent hours staring at the wall, trying to process how everything had fallen apart so fast. One moment, he was a global icon, and the next, he was a prisoner waiting on paperwork that might never save him. But this wasn't the music industry, this wasn't business, this was the justice system, and no matter how many appeals he filed, no matter how fast his lawyer moved, there was one thing Diddy couldn't outrun, the truth that had brought him here in the first place.